Hey, so my name is Neil, and um, I'll basically go through how I approach the homework problem, and basically what I do or the steps I take in order to do my assignment or the homework assignment. So firstly, what I basically do is obviously just read the homework PDF file, and I'll just be going through homework here and basically just show you the steps I did or the steps I take normally for any homework that I have to do for coding. So first, just skim through the introduction, what they want us to do or what the purpose of the homework is. And usually the introduction, they just tell you what they want us to get familiar with. And over here, they say, we can see it says the purpose of this homework is to get students familiar with the server and argument manager and yada, yada, yada. Okay. So moving on to the more important part would be the input and output file. So this is where they tell you what the input files and the output file that you're going to be downloading from the Google Drive is going to be about. So over here we can see the input file is going to be a single text file that will never be empty. It will contain three parts. First one being the integer for the size of a matrix, and it will be a square matrix. So that lets us know that the rows and the column is going to be same number. And then it says a matrix with number Aij. For the number of cells, there will be one matrix row per line in the file, and the values are separated by space. Okay. And then they say the condition for the subset matrix, even, odd, equal, greater than, less than, or equal to, and they'll be written in that format. So that's that. And then the output file, they want us to output a single text file that contains real number that's between 0 and 100, or equal to 0 and 100, or between 0 and 100 that includes 0 and 100. Oh my god. Okay. And over here they give an example of the input file. So over here we can see the first line is a number, and from here we can see that the first number is going to be the size of a matrix. So 3 would tell us that the matrix is going to be 3 by 3, which it is. We can see 3 rows and 3 columns, and they consist of a number. And then after the matrix, we have a condition that would let us know what to do for the following matrix that they gave us. So here it says greater than 6 and output 0.33. Now, normally from reading this, it's kind of hard to tell, okay, like how did they get an output of 0.33? So that's where you have to scroll a little bit farther down, and it tells you the rules and the operation and how they got the answer or how they got the value for the output file. And over here, we can see by reading the input file, you should be able to create a grid that reads a number. Each number corresponds with the cell. After reading example file below from text 11 or input 11.txt, and depending on the condition, we need to perform the appropriate operation to count the number of cells that meet the condition. Then the percentage will be calculated by number of correct cells over the total cells. For example, using the matrix above, the condition is odd numbers. So subset would be all the odd numbers from the matrix, which is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, which is 5 cells. And then the total number of cells we have is 9. So 5 over 9 is 0.56. Finally, write the percentage in 2 decimal places. Okay, so now basically this is where from the program or from the file, we should be able to get what the input file, the output file, what the input file consists of, and what the output file consists of, and why or how the output file, how to get the answer for the output file. Now, normally, this one was pretty straightforward, but normally for homework 1, it was kind of tough, or it was kind of hard to understand when they were asking you to decode the matrix and how how do you basically approach the problem. So many times, if you do get confused by the way they tell the rules, I mean, you can always ask the TA, or you can always ask in the for a group chat, and people will always be there to ask. And you can also ask Dr. Rizk before, like he always has like that 15-minute break time before starting the class, and there's always office hours you can go to. But most of the time, it's pretty straightforward. Like if they tell you, sometimes the I'm not gonna lie, sometimes the instructions are kind of hard to understand. So for that, you can always ask the TH for help and what do they mean by it, and they can always tell you this is what they want and this is what they're looking for. So after finally understanding the file, and another thing is before starting to code, you first have to understand what the code or what the homework is asking you for. Because if you don't know what you're coding for, then you wouldn't know how to start off, and you would never be able to start the coding without understanding. So the first step, you gotta understand the homework, the PDF file, and then you can start to brainstorm how to approach it. So first thing first, obviously, when you code, you want to have the first thing you're going to do is usually I like to start off with like writing the name and then ID number, but this is not really needed, but this is an example, ID number, and then the homework you're doing. And then they usually, some teacher likes to have a comment on the top what the coding is about. I learned this in high school, like one of my high school teachers said always write what the code is about at the top, and you can just say this code will introduce the usually what do you want? They want us to single step want us to create calculate the percent. Okay, over here. So they usually tell us in the introduction what they want us to do or what the code is going to be about. So over here you can say the calculate percentage of a subset from a given matrix. We'll calculate percentage of a subset from a given matrix. And this is not necessary. I just like to do it because I feel like my personal preference. I just feel like it's important, or I mean, that's what I've been taught from since high school. So I just prefer doing that. And then obviously you just start off with a hashtag include IOS stream. And then since you're needing the argument manager, always introduce or include hashtag include argument manager.h. Sorry about this. This is my first time kind of doing this in the video. So apologies for making a lot of mistakes and stuttering a lot, but I do talk fast when I get nervous, but I would try to slow down things and make it as easy and transparent, the instructions as transparent as possible. Also, before going into starting the code, I want to briefly go over the argument manager. I noticed on the groups, many people do get confused on what the argument manager is or how it works. So I was able to find the homework 0 from Cosc2430, and our this is like the first time we were introduced into programming C++. And this file teaches us, or like basically gives us a brief information of what the argument manager is and how it works. So over here we can see that it's C++ main function is mostly important or mostly defined with a return type int and without parameters int main log, and then command line arguments are given with the name, the command line shell operating system. Okay, so over here, this is where it says to pass a command line argument, we typically define main with 2 arguments. First argument being the number of arguments that is passed, and then second being the list of command line arguments. So there's 2 ways you can write it. You can write it int main int argc, comma char asterisk or star argv brackets and close parentheses, or you can write it as int argc, comma char double star argv. So double star and 1 star with the brackets means the same thing with the double star, the pointer. So you can either write the first one or the bottom one. Doesn't matter. It means the same thing. So now what to now what does argc and argv stands for is argc is basically it stands for argument count. So it stores in the number of argument that is passed into the main function. So it's in and stored number and it's in and stores number of command line argument passed by the user, including the name of the program. So if we pass a value to the program, value of arg would be 2. Oh yeah, so that what do they mean by that is the name of the program would be mainly if you name the would be main over here, like a main name of the function or the whatever you name your program would be ./main, and then the argument you're gonna pass in. But that ./main is it counts as a value, so it counts as one of the arguments that you're passing by. So including the numbers or whatever you pass on, you got to add in that ./main as part of the number of command that you're passing into. And obviously argv should not be negative. And then argv is argument vector. It's an array of characters, pointer listing all the arguments. And over here is an example that helps us better understand the thing. So over here you got int main argc, and then you have entered argc arguments dot nlen. So whenever you input over here, whenever you input this, when you type this in ./main 1, 3, and 5, it says that you have entered 4 arguments. So the 4 arguments are being 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the 4 arguments that you're passing into the main function. And then argv is the all the arguments in the vector or the array argv. So over here we can see that we're printing all the cells that are in array argv. And the first one obviously is going to be the one that you entered in. It's going to be in the same order that you entered in. So .main 1, 3, and 5. So this is briefly what the argument manager is and how you pass, basically how you pass an argument header file. So, okay, so we have to include argc.char star argv. And then, as many of you might have noticed or seen in the group chat or Discord, I believe somebody posted that the day is when you want to extract the files from the argument manager, and you can use this format for like almost every program or any homework that you guys do. So you do argument manager dot get. Okay, let's make sure. Like C, comma, argv, comma, parentheses, and then my bad. Okay, that should be right. Okay, and then this argument manager would capture the variables of argc, the values that you point in, and then argv, the vector or the array, my bad. And the string, basically, you can see on input 1, it's going to be, anytime you extract a value or read from a file, it's always going to be read as a string if you want to read it as a string, typically. So you can say string, or better, this constant string, name it as input equal to m dot get input, and then same thing for the output because we got 2 files. String output, my god, I can't type, dot get output. And then whenever you want to open a file, obviously when you want to read from a file, you got to open a file by stating if stream is a command that you want to use when you want to read values or arguments or text from a file. So if stream input file, and then this is going to be basically the input string input that's going to be read from the argument. It can be input what is this? Oh, okay. So anytime you want to read in a file or write from a file, you have to have include fstream library. So this compiler C++ knows that okay, it went away. That you're trying to read from a file and write to a file. Upstream output file. And the reason why I have two like input and output is because you can see on homework 4 that whenever you have that you're gonna have two files, an input file that you're gonna be reading from and an output file that you're gonna be outputting your result that you calculated from the input into the output. So that's why there's two files that you need to create, one for input and one for output. Okay, so we got this, and then so whenever what I like to do is I obviously as I'm working through my code, I like to test, and obviously I'm not and you make mistake and you don't get the code, like you don't just start typing the code and then you expect it to work in the first go. So there's always trials and errors in what was that? Okay. Hang on. There's always trials and errors when you're typing the code because you're always gonna have errors and it's not gonna work perfectly the first time you run it. So what I like to do is like I like to comment out the upstream. I don't want to print my result into an output file just yet. I'll do that at the end of the code when I know my code works perfectly fine. And I also don't want to read in from the I don't want to read all the arguments input files at once. I'm gonna do one at a time. So I typically like to look at the file one at a time, and obviously if I can get one file to work, then other two is most likely gonna work. But sometimes you have not all input files the same condition. So if I can get one down and then second one is slightly different than the first one, then I can adjust to it and so on. So I like to work with the one input file at once. So let's just work with input.0.text file. So what we're doing over here is we're not reading anything from the argument manager. We're not going to work with that right now. You can have it. You don't have to comment the argument manager if you don't want to. It won't affect with the code. But over here in line 17, what I'm trying to do is I'm opening the file input.01. I'm opening this file that I'm going to be reading in my main code. And I'm going to be working with it as I go on. So firstly first, just read the first line from the, just gonna move this up here. Oh, I can't move it, okay. I'm gonna read the first line from the input file, and let's just declare a string get line. I'm gonna be reading it from, and over here, the get line function works at get line gets a one whole line from the file that you're reading from. So you gotta write get line, open parentheses, and then the name of the file that you stored it into. So now I'm opening this file and I'm putting it declaring into this input file. So my input file is input.01. So open input file and store the value that it extracts from the input file into str string. So now anytime I wanna, with the file, it's kind of hard to, as you're coding it, you know what you're coding, but you also want to make sure that C++, the compiler, is on the same page as you. So over here on line 22, I extracted the first line of the file, input file, and I want to know that, oh, I want to make sure that the compiler is doing exactly what I'm thinking it's doing. So to double check that, I always do cout str to see if it works. Oh, I forgot this is not Command R. Okay, so run 3. Okay, so the first line is 3. Double check that. The first line is 2. So perfectly, it works great so far. It's doing everything I wanted to do. So now I can get rid of this. So I know that it's extracting the first line perfectly as I wanted to. And so now what to move on to a problem, we know that the first number is going to be the size of our matrix. So we extracted our number and it's stored into str, but like it's stored as a string. So we got to read it. We got to put it as an integer. And then we can make it as a matrix. So one way to approach it is convert string str number 3, letter 3 into integer, and then make a matrix with a size 3 by 3. So let's do that. So input file get line string int size equal to str, and then we can have constant, make a matrix with the size that would be oh yeah, we make a matrix with the size of 3 times 3, which is going to be 9. So declare a matrix and we're going to set it equal to new int. That's going to be a size of s, which is going to be the number that we want it to be, and then set it to where okay, to make it each integer, we want to make each cell as an integer. So we're storing the numbers of, since it's a number we're storing, we want to make each of the cells a new int. So int I equal to I, make a for loop 0. We want I to be less than s incremented. Oh my God, okay. Int s content integer. Oh, got a pointer here. Yeah, asterisk. Okay, yeah. Now we want the matrix of I to be equal to every matrix in a cell to be new int with the size of s. So now we made the size, we made our matrix the size that we want, which is going to be 3 by 3. And over here, we can see that now what we need to, next step is we want to assign the values that's in the file into the matrix that we just created, matrix map. We just called it a matrix map. So we want to store all these numbers from the file into map. So what we can do now is that obviously we have to extract the next line of code. I mean, there's a number of ways you can do this. Like you can extract, do input. You can do input file, string, store it into, I don't know, num. And the cool thing about this greater than arrow is it ignores the spaces. So you can directly just store each of the num values into the matrix by, to show you here what num is stored in. Going pretty slow. Number 1, which is correct because we got the first number is going to be number 1. And then if you do it again, it's going to input, it's going to store in number 2 into num, because it ignores, the great thing about it is that greater than sign ignores the spaces and moves on to the next value after the number one. So 1, 2. So first we outputted 1, and then okay, just to make it clear, 1 and then 2. There we go. So that's one of the ways you can do it, and then you can just say see out. You can just make a for loop and then put each of the nums and loop it around until the end of the matrix. So let's do that. So we got for in when I equals to 0, God, R less than S, I plus plus, and then that's for the row. We gotta have column I in J equal to 0, J less than S, which is the same size because we have same number of rows and same number of columns. Since it's a square matrix, they say right here. So it's okay if we have less than S. And then now we want to assign each of these numbers from 1 to, can I highlight this? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 into our matrix mat. And our matrix mat is size, we already sized it 3 by 3. So it's automatically the perfect size that we need for the input. So we can just do, like I said, we can do input file, store it into matrix I of J. So over here, the cool thing about it is it's going to start storing from 0. So when I is 0 and J is 0, it's going to store in the first value, which is 1. And then it's going to hit the end of the loop, increase to J, which is a column. J is going to become 1, so 0, 1. And then it's going to go again in 0, 2. So basically it's going to start from 1, store 1, 0, 0, then 0, 1, and then 0, 2, and then move on to the next 0, 1, 0, like that. So to see it, let's output it. If anytime if you get an error, like if you get infinite loop or something not happening as something giving you error and you don't know where the error is, there's a perfect way or a great way for you to find where your error is. Always see out after stuff. Like if the file is not reading right here and I continue writing it and I execute at the end of the code and I don't know where the problem is, from over here I'll just say see out str to make sure it's reading the right string and stuff. So see out everywhere after every like function or every command that you do to make sure it's doing the right thing. So over here let's do see out. Actually, it's much easier to. So let's just run it and then we can test it out after. So it ran. So now you want to check if the matrix stored in the value perfectly as you want it. So you can be like, okay, let me just check if matrix 1, 1 stored in the value that it's supposed to. So now the matrix 1, 1, so 1, 1 should supposed to store in 5. So if I run this value should be 5. So there we go. So we have right. And even if you don't want to do one by one, you can just literally do a for loop and then just print out all the cells, individual cells from the matrix and see if that is correct. If you run that, I just typically do one because it's much easier. Like, I don't need to check everything. If I can check a couple of them, if I know it's right, then I know the rest of it's right. So now we got the matrix into the cell. Now our next step is the conditions. So now we got to read the second or the last condition or the last part of the input file. And then after reading that, we got to differentiate if it's E for even, O for odd, and then equal to, greater than or less than, and then perform the action for that. So how? Okay. For that we can just do while. I personally like while getLine. Although I know it says getLine is not good to use for the program or the compiler. It gets the job done that you need it to. I'll just say getLine stream the condition so stored into condition, and then let's print out condition to see if it's printing out greater than 6 that it's supposed to be. Just want to make sure that as we go, it's just right. Perfect. So from now on, like, I don't know if from here on, it's pretty self-explanatory. Just basically, if greater than, if str1 greater than or not 1, 0 equal, Jesus. Or by the way, if you do use, like, let's say if one of you, or let's say if you want to use this, if you're approaching a problem where you're comparing a string into like a character, if it's equal to, greater than, or less than, don't make the mistake of putting 1 bar or 1 quotation. Put 2 quotation because it's a string. It has to be in 2 quotations, and 1 bar, or not 1 bar. What am I saying? 1 quotation would be for char. So that's when you have char values, and you can do that if greater than, if string 0 is greater than, then you do greater than action, and then if it's less than, you do less than. If it's even, you count all the evens, and pretty much that's how I really do it. And obviously I wouldn't and what was I gonna say? Okay, yeah. So here I'll just fast forward it and then get the code that I wrote. I don't want to sit here and code the whole thing with you guys because I'm pretty sure the whole code was, you all were able to get homework 0 and you know how to code that part. And where did the file go that I opened? Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is where I do just copy it and then I'll paste it and I explain my process. So let's say I code this, and then, oh, okay, so some variables are not, okay, so you can just do it after. Okay, let's see. So we got, oh, also you can name it a string over here. It doesn't really, you can replace it as when you're reading a string from here, because this string, you're just converting that into a number, assigning it to map, or assigning it to your matrix, and then you're not going to need it. So you can overwrite that with another, with the condition. So from here, I say, so what I did is reading the last condition, which is greater than 6. And then I create a for loop trying to read in, if it's E, then do this action. If it's O, then do this action. So let's say, so for in equal to 0. I did it trouble. Reload. Stay on the page. Well, I guess I have to click on read page. Hopefully I don't lose the thing. Okay. So over here, I'm starting from the first for loop. So the reason I had for loop, I'm comparing the things. So for I equal to 0, and then so I'm comparing each of the cells. So this is the way where I'm going to be starting from cell 00 and then going through looking at each of the cells and see if it follows if it hits underneath the condition that we're looking for. Okay, so and then I said if string is equal to equal. So obviously when we have, so if the last condition is going to be either just E or just O or equal to some number, greater than some number, less than some number. But for first two, especially because it's just E or O, so that's why I said the string, if it's equal to EE, then divide the cell, which is just one number, not whole thing, but like one number at a time, by modulo 2. And if it's equal to 0, which is if you divide it by 2, and if it's equal to 0, that means it's even number. And if it's an even number, then make a count that as like 1, and then count how many numbers of even we have in it. So we got to declare the variable count. So let's just say int count equal to 0. So every time it hits this, it's going to make a count 1. And then you can even make it even plus plus, so like you can have different variable count for each of the condition. But I guess it's more efficient to do it count, because after I was done with the code, I kind of looked over it and I was like, hey, okay, how can I make it more efficient? And one of the tiers like, hey, if you just do count, then there's no need for you to create different variables. But there's nothing wrong. The code still works, but it's more efficient to it's easier if you just do count plus plus. The same thing with the odd. If it's an odd, divided by 2, and then for this one, you say if it's not equal to 0, then count as an odd. So what this is basically doing is, so the first one, if this is, this is the file. Okay, so if this is divisible by 2, and if the module for that is 0, then it's even number. But if obviously 2 divided by 1, it's not gonna be 0, it's gonna be 1. So this, if it's equal to 0 over here, modulo 2, if it's equal to 0, then that means we know that cell is an even number, so it's gonna count 1, so it's like 1 even number, 2 even numbers, and so on if it follows that thing. I mean, if it's odd, then it's gonna count this. And so now for the third one, else if string dot find equals. So what this does, string dot find, is it finds from the string. So from the string can have, for here, let's say, if the string is equal to 3. So the condition is any number in the cell that equals to 3, or however many times you have a 3, what is the percentage of 3s from the total number of cells? So if there's like 3 times the 3 pops up in the cells in the matrix that size of 9, you do 3 divided by 9 and you get 1/3, which is 0.33%. This is where the string is going to just be O for, that's 0. O for odd. This is just going to be a string where it's just going to be E for even. So if there is an equal in that string and not equal to 1, so that means if there is, I'll say if there is an equal in the string, then do this condition. And now over here, this is one of the ways I approached it. Obviously, not everybody's gonna have the same approach or same ideas how to approach any problem or coding, because that's the beauty of the coding, because you can solve it whichever way you want. You can code your problem whichever way you want, as long as it makes sense of C++, or it follows the regulation of C++. So over here, I could not just straight up, if my string is equal to 0, I tried so much of trying to just say, okay, int num equal to, change the string that is on the second, hang on. So this is the 0 and this is 1. So string at cell 1 into num, because I want to change this into a number, because this is obviously read as a string when I'm reading input file string. But I couldn't do that because it only works if the string is one number. Over here, when we read it, it read as a one number. So you can do strio string. But if it's more than one number, if it has some sort of a character, then you cannot just do that. And I was like, I had to research it online and then try to find it. So I had to do a little loophole, and I had to store whatever that was into a char. So let me create or not a char. I had to create as a dummy variable, create it into a string. So I stored it into a string A. So this is a string A. So now I can say that, oh, string A just contains one number, which is 3. So it just contains a number. And then now I can use the SDIO. I couldn't use it for this because string had equal to 3. So that time I couldn't do it. So I had to place it into a dummy variable, that's how I thought, like, oh, this could work. And it worked. So I was like, okay, cool. And now I can get to move on. So let's int, and so the error can go away. Int n, and I changed the string 3 into a number. So now I can say, hey, if the cell is equal to number 3, then do a count plus plus. Right now the count is 0 for each of them. So only once the condition is true, then it's gonna increase the count 1, 2, and then 3. So same thing for here, it's greater than. So the string is gonna be string greater than 6, because the input file 1 is 6. So I'm gonna use the example for that, 6. And then we're gonna store the little number 6 into a string A, and then we're gonna convert that string with one number into an n. And then if it's greater than that number, we're gonna do a count plus plus. Same thing with less than. Let's say string is less than any number 4. This is 4, stored into a dummy variable string or dummy string A. Now change that into a number. And then what is this? Oh, I was trying to test it out if it works or not, because I had a part of the code. So see out less than. And then if the cell matrix is less than that number, which is n right here, we do count plus plus. And then over here, we can say, hey, if the string was equal to, this is, because right now this string is still the last condition string, which is greater than 6. And if you're reading file 2, then it would be E. And then if you're reading file 3, it would be equal to 2. So the string is still the same string as we used to identify the even, or equal to, greater than, or less than. So if string was equal to even, the result would be, the result is going to be in a float. So let's create a float variable, float result. And then remember when we said, I changed the thing into one variable, which is count. So what it's going to do, if it was even number, then it's just going to take all the count for even numbers divided by the total number of cells, which in this case is going to be 9 because we're reading it from input file 1. And then over total, that's supposed to be an integer. So declare that total. I think by default, when you differentiate or declare a number for integer, it's 0 by default. But sometimes it makes an error, or I had an error, but I feel like it was a different error. But to be safe, if it doesn't work, you can just set it equal to 0. But I'll leave it out for now to see if it works. But I'm pretty sure by default, C++ declares a variable 0. So for all of these, we did a count plus plus, because remember we changed the variable from odd even to just one variable in all, so we don't have to create. So over here, instead of creating int even, odd, greater than, less than, or equal to, we just create one variable, which is count 0. So we just do count over total, and that would be stored into a result. So over here, if it's odd, then it's going to do however number of odds that were in the cell over the total number of cells of the matrix. This is all in the matrix, the total number of matrix, and then the number of even that were in the matrix divided by total that was stored into a result. Number of odd, and the number of equal that follow the condition, number of cells that follow the greater than condition and less than. And then over here we have output underlined because over the number up there we commented out. So now if you want to test out, obviously before, you don't want to just straight up output it into the file, because anytime you do that, it's just going to create output file. And it's going to just overwrite it. So to make it like to having to go over here and check if your output file is correct, I personally like to just have it everything in front of my face. So let's say see out result. And if it's, oh, I have to, did not even see that. Okay. So see out result for the input file 01. And it says infinite. Okie dokie. So let's see where we're messing up. Result less than, if this is greater than, so it should enter this file. So let's say if this actually working. If it's entering this loop or not. So let's say greater than. So sometime obviously, see this time we have an error and we don't typically know where it is occurring. So we just put a C out at a place you think it might be occurring to see if it's working or not. Great, okay. So we have this loop running over and over again for infinite times. So let's see why is that. So if it's greater than 6, obviously we already have 3 numbers that's greater than 6. String dot find of if that is making sure if it matches up with the code. Okay. Less than S. Oh, let's print out S just in case what the S is. Okay. 3, great. Okay, so this should be put less than. Hang on, is it right? Let me check. CL STO. Oh my God. Okay. Okay, we use string, but that's we never declared included the library for string. Oh God, that could be so annoying. Okay, so we got string. Is there anything else? Okay, that should turn blue. In the library, or I just want to see if that works. String str comma. So there is right? String should I turn blue? Okay, let's see this. So greater than 0, less than. Is the repel? Okay, we can just run it on. Oh God. Okay, we can just run it on the Visual Studio Code. Let's see. Okay, so Visual Studio Code has, okay, here we can do, so remember we commented this out, we're still in our first page. So we're testing one file at a time because that's the best way to approach it, because you want to approach all the files at once. Input.text1, and then you created a string, created the matrix. So over here I did input greater than string because it's just the one number that I needed. You could also do get line like I did on the repel. It should still give you the same answer. And over here, you can see that I tried printing out the matrix, see if it's right or wrong. Oh, haha. I was supposed to, yeah, I forgot to do this. The total is basically the number of rows and number of size. That's the total number of stuff that you're gonna have in the thing. Okay, and then this is the string that we did. While if I used to say same thing, str. And then over here I had even plus plus. There's no need for me to create different variables here, but I could have just done count plus plus and it should have given me the same answer. And then we don't need this. So right now we're not putting in outputting the file because we're still trying to reacting like this is the first time we're coding it. So we want to print the result, see if a code line. So I can do command R this time. Why is everything running so slow today? And there we go. See, so we result. Let me just do L1. Okay, so 0.333, and we can see from answer 1, it's 0.33. Obviously, we can modify it into just 2 decimal places. So this is what you want to do. So obviously, first, whenever you want to first code, before starting coding, you want to understand the homework first of all. You want to understand what it's giving you, and then example of it, because obviously sometimes it's kind of hard to just go based off just the direction. Because I didn't, honestly, when I first read it, I had no clue what this was. I didn't even know what this was trying to say. But obviously from the example, I understood like, oh, okay, so this number is greater than or equal to 0. And then they give you the output of it. And then you won't know why they got the output just from this. So over here, they explain you how to output the thing. So they explain you what you have to do to the input file to get the output that they want you to get. And then first start off with, I just write my name in the program. First start off with the include, obviously, and the main. So this thing right here, the highlighted portion right here. Okay, I'll just say it after in a bit once I comment it out. So first start off with argument manager. You don't have to, but you can start off with just this first at the beginning because you want to work one file at a time because that's the easiest way to I feel like that's the most efficient and easiest way to do, excuse me, working one file at a time. And then like I said, as you extracting line by line, doing the code like they want you to do, create the matrix, find the condition, create the matrix by the size that they want you to. So over here, we extracted the first line. I even see out it to make sure I was doing like outputting right. Identify, declare the matrix, create the matrix size, and then input the matrix with all the numbers from the input file, all of these. And then basically declare the size using the last string, the condition string, declare if the matrix cell is even, odd, or equal to the number that whatever they said, and greater than. And always, if you want to if you're unsure if the thing's gonna work or not, you can always say cout if the number over here, cout, and if you wanted to see if the number, if it converted the right number, STIO, if it converted the right number, you can always do cout. And then sometimes if you have infinite loop, you can say, okay, like I did on the repel just a couple of minutes ago, to cout greater than, and I noticed that this loop was running over and over again. And then it was probably because I didn't have my total initialized, or maybe the string thing. Not sure. Most likely probably string, because I was trying to create a dummy string, and then I didn't have the include string, and it was not highlighted blue, or it didn't register. So probably that was the reason. And then after you declare this, you can do the division part and store it into result. And then that's your final answer. That's the result that you're going to be stored into your output file. Now, before you want to put in the output file, you want to see out the result to see if you actually got the correct result. Because if you are putting the wrong result to the output file, then there's no point of creating the output file first, because you want to get the right result first. So now you got, okay, that's perfect. Like you got, okay, 0.33. That's the one I want. Correct answer. Oh, before that, we want to get into right number of decimal places. So we can do cout fixed set precision, just 2 decimal places. Result, and then there we go. 0.33. Get rid of this, and it would just print out 0.33. So now we got the result we want, and now it's to better be safe, or not to better be safe, just to like double check. Let's just check the other file, input file 2. Now it's going to do the same thing you did, but work with input file 2, and the answer is 0.5. So let's check the answer for O2, 0.5. And then you want to check the third file also and run that, and you get 000. See if that's right. 000. That's perfect. Now to final sheet, to be ready to submit the code onto the server, you want to get rid of the stream. Oh, and if you want to test out your code, you can say output, I don't know, output 11.txt, and then you can get rid of this because you don't want to print it here. You want to output it into the output file, and then obviously close the file. And then when you run it, it created an output file right here, 0. Now it will update every time you run a different file. So that was the file I ran, file input 0.36. If I run input 0.1, then it should say 0.33 after it's done compiling. Compile successfully, 0.33. So there you have it. So we can now, we are ready to submit it to the server. So we can do output, input, take out these comments because we definitely need that, and run it to save it. There we go. It's a little warning, STIO for the thing, but it still works. So this highlighted portion right here is what you typically gonna need to write, or start off by writing that for almost all the homeworks, unless if they have, I feel like for homework 2, they have another line. So for homework 2, you're gonna have like another line, like comment string, a constant string, command equal to m dot get quotation command, and then because you're going to be reading from command file, you say if stream command file parentheses command whatever word you used to here. But many times it's just going to be input and output based on whatever they have, because over here they had only input and output. So you're really going to have this. So this is the highlighted portion. So there you have it. I apologize if I made a mistake, or if I did not explain something clearly. But if you ever do have any questions next time, I would be happy to help you. If I don't answer, I probably have busy with other classes, but I do have tough other classes. Other tough classes, so I tend to be busy quite often. But hey, if there's something I can help you with, I would be very happy to. But that's how I approach, and that's how I do the homework problems. And I agree, like many times I don't understand, or like if I don't get, like for this one right here, like I said, I was trying to convert the string that was a string that was over here is less than 6. I did not know how to convert that in just that like number 6 into an integer. And I did a lot of, because usually whenever you get stuck, I like to go on online Google and just see how, look at notes and look at examples and then learn how to do it and then implement it. So it took me a while, but I was able to think outside the box, like, hey, if I just create a dummy string, then I should be able to do it. And then it worked. Because basically coding is just like trial and error. So you just basically work your way around, think outside the box. Sometimes if you get stuck, you can ask TAs and they'll be more than happy to help you out. But there you have it. That's how I approach the homework. Main thing is you just gotta understand the homework first, what it's asking you for. Once you get this, then you can get to this. Because if you don't get this, then there's no really point in trying to do this. Because if I was able to understand that I needed this number converted, this number doesn't really matter, or the sign doesn't matter to me because I already defined the sign here. So if you know what you like, if you know the code that you are, if you understand the instructions and if you know what you want to code and output, then coding should be easier than mm, easier than what you okay now easier than when you don't know what the instructions are. So it'd be a little easier if you know the instructions, what you know what you want to do, and your brain starts. So with that, I would like to end it. Thank you. And again, once again, I apologize if I do make mistake. I am definitely not perfect. I'm definitely learning just like you guys. But I just wanted to share. Dr. Rizk wanted to ask me to share how I approach the problem or how I do homework. So I just wanted to share how I did it, how I do problems when I get it. So this is the typical steps I do. But thank you. And yeah.